Hey, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here with me, Diana.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome. So, we are here to talk about how to discover your voice and conquer the fear of disappointing others with grace. I'm Coach Susan, and Coach Diana is here. Hi, Tammy. Good to see you from Arizona. We want to welcome you all to Leslie Vernick's public Facebook page, where we would love to interact with you today. And if you would like to ask us a question based on our topic today, you can go to leslievernick.com/question/ to do a private question, because whatever you put in the chat is visible to all. We're here on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. So welcome to all of you. We've got Kelly supporting us today, and she'll make sure that your question gets to us.
We've got some neighbors to the north here. Susan and I are in the northeastern part of the United States. And so we're pretty much neighbors, right, Susan?
I know, we are neighbors.
Yeah.
I know, we'll have to schedule a visit at some point.
That would be great.
All right, so let's dive into our topic.
Yeah.
So I don't know, we can take this a lot of different directions. I'm wondering what's resonating with you all in terms of our topic, and maybe just kind of think for a moment, who in your life is causing you to silence your voice? Do you have a situation where you're noticing that you're not showing up as yourself, or you're quieting yourself, you're backing away from who God is calling you to be?
It's a great topic. I think so many of us lose our voice. And I'm wondering, like, what happens to cause you to lose your voice? And so if you could let us know, when you think about discovering your voice, we also think about losing your voice. So I'm wondering, as Susan said, what happens that causes you to silence your voice? What circumstances, surroundings? What do you notice?
Mm. Yeah, taking that pause to even thinking about this. I mean, perhaps that's something you've never even done.
Mm.
So
Oh,
Tammy's saying family and probably myself. I don't know if I've ever had one. Oh,
yeah.
yes,
We're gonna
that
talk.
may be true too. If you've never discovered your voice, you've grown up without having a strong sense of self and who you are.
So even I wonder what happens in childhood that causes us to lose our voice. I don't know about you ladies out there, but I've talked about this, I think, publicly before. I'm the youngest of four. And sometimes I felt like I've had four moms. I have three older sisters, two of whom are more vocal. And I've always looked externally for that voice, for them to tell me what my voice should be. Um,
Mm.
and it wasn't until I was in middle age that I realized I was still looking at everyone else as if they were my big sisters or my big siblings, and that I had to do that work myself of figuring things out.
Mm. Yeah. And that may be true for some of you, but I'm seeing in the chat also, it could be, a fear, but also Janie's saying when he interrupts or gets louder and won't let me talk. So it may be somebody later in your life who has been manipulative, controlling, abusive in some way, who has caused you to end the voice you used to have. So either of those could be true, right? It could be an early situation in your life where it was a strategy that worked for you, to have a quiet voice, maybe to look to others to tell you who you should be so that you could fit in, have a sense of belonging. For Diana, perhaps that was true for you, is belonging within your family, is that you had to have a unified voice and looking for what that should be. Does that ring true for you?
Are you asking me or our audience?
Yeah, you, yes. And your
Oh.
particular situation that you shared, was it about finding a sense of belonging with your sisters and with your family?
Well, it's hard to say when I was really young, but I think what I'm conscious of and aware of a dynamic, and even still in some ways in family situations, I have more of a voice now with my older sisters than I ever have. Meaning that I participate in conversations, but sometimes me, Susan. Well,
Mhm.
in our context, I'm a little outspoken because I'm comfortable with everybody, right? But
That's the Diane I know. Yes.
yeah, but often in family gatherings, I'm quiet, and sometimes, I won't compete to have to be heard, you know, and so I think as a younger person, I don't know, attention and focus was on the older kids, you know what I mean? More
Mhm.
so. And I think by the time I became an adolescent, I just grew quiet. And I found other avenues to express myself. And we talked about this when we were coming live that in my home, individuation wasn't something that was encouraged. The family environment was encouraged. And so when I was trying to find out who I was and individuate, it was more looked at as if I was disrupting or harming the family dynamics. It was like it was something wrong. Like if I wanted to spend time with my friends, I'm talking about when I was mainly an adolescent, and be with
Mhm.
them more than my family, which is quite natural at that age. But in my
Sure.
family, it was more like it wasn't, I would say mainly from my mom, it wasn't something that was encouraged. And so I always felt like I was being bad or doing something wrong because I wanted to be with my friends. And so for me, learning who I was and finding that voice didn't occur back then. And in some ways, it started to occur when I was in my mid 20s, and really in the context of being away from home and being
Mhm.
out on my own. And some of our ladies here have not ever had that opportunity, especially because I didn't get married till I was 30. So I had a lot of time to really explore who I was, and who I am. But if you've never had that opportunity as a younger person, and we do grow to learn to fit in, like you said, we don't want to disappoint our family members. We question those things. And if you haven't done that when you're younger and you just get married right out of the home, I'm wondering how that would affect your ability to really discover who you are on your
Mm.
own.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's what I experienced. I got married when I was 21, going from my parents' home to being married and not having that, period in between to really explore who
Mhm.
I was and what I wanted and,
Yeah.
strengthening my sense of self and my voice, going from what they expected me to be to being what someone else expected me to be,
Right.
right? And that made it a real challenge.
I think we need to encourage, especially our daughters. And
Mhm.
I will say that even though that happened for me during adolescence, by the time I was in my early 20s, my parents were fierce about pushing me into, and encouraging me is a better word, into being who God has called me to be. We all grew to a sense of maturity with that. So I did have that opportunity then, and they weren't in a hurry to marry off their last daughter. So they just encouraged me, to not find my worth in a man, but to find my worth in other ways.
Yeah, and I know you and I both have daughters, right? And so this is
Yes.
something that we're trying to pour into our own daughters is, helping them become themselves, right? And not be reliant on a man to tell them who they should be, but having that time to really create the life they want.
Yeah, I mean, but I will be fully transparent here. I think even though I had the opportunity to do that when I was in my 20s, by the time I met my husband, I think I still felt prey to not verbalizing what I really thought and felt, um, and
Mhm.
wanting him to, I wouldn't use the term be disappointed with me, but wanting to please. And
Mhm.
wanting to belong, wanting to, fit in, I think for me, the term is better go along, you
Go
know?
along to get along.
Yeah, just, and I used to
Mhm.
call myself easygoing,
Mhm.
which was me gaslighting myself, just not taking the time or the opportunity to really discover, um, you know, those deeper parts of yourself.
Yeah. And I think back at that time, that was sort of the teaching in the church too, right? For women is to help your husband be the best that God created him to be, more so than focusing on what is God creating you to be.
Was a bit confusing to me because I'm not traditional, and so I'm like, "Okay, I'm close to 30," it was kind of a joke. I mean, I did a thesis when I was an undergraduate. My thesis was on dual roles for career decision making for women,
Mhm.
domestic versus professional, and my
Uh-huh.
mom and dad, they were laughing. They're like, "I can't believe she's getting married," because I was so non-traditional. And so it does cause a lot of confusion for us in these roles that we play and in the relationships that we have when we're asking ourselves the question about how do I conform and be myself? How am I accepted, really in the church, in certain circles, without giving up my authenticity? And how do I use my voice? I remember when I first got married, I went to a Bible study at this church, that my husband and his family would go to, and there was a lot of older women who I thought could easily be good mentors. And here's the thing, and I have to just say this because it came to my mind, like, I'm so grateful for Leslie as a mentor. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Because she
I do.
is just a great mentor. But
She is.
these women were not a mentor in the way that I needed, and they were offering opportunities for me to get involved in areas that just were not me. And there's nothing wrong with what they were offering, but it was very traditional, very conservative, and, in the areas that I didn't have gifts. And so it was hard. It was hard to find a place where I fit in and to use my voice because I was so different.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And being able to accept yourself for your differences, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, and when I say Leslie's a great mentor, because she's very multifaceted and a non-traditional woman.
Mhm.
And, that's me. Like, I don't, like, I just am not a domestic goddess. I never will be.
Mhm.
And if that's your idea and your perspective on who we're supposed to be, what do you do to use your voice when, like, that's not you? Somebody's receiving a message that the video has ended. We don't have that here. Let me reach out to our team while Susan is and see.
Yeah, I don't have that here either, but, I love reading in the chat all of your comments, and there are, various reasons why you might fear disappointing others. Um, and that may be that you're anxious people will be mad at you for saying no,
Yeah.
or you don't, wanna be viewed as unreliable. You may even feel like they need your help in order to succeed. You might feel like you're out of control, right? That might be a reason. Maybe you have no boundaries. Maybe you're terrified of making mistakes. Maybe it is that need to belong in a group or in a relationship, that going along to get along. Or maybe it's that strategy for avoiding conflict. Perhaps that's what's behind your fear. So I would just kind of ask you to pause and reflect, each of you, um, what is behind that fear? What's underneath the fear? So if we were to ask you, why are you afraid of that? What comes up for you? What does
Mm.
it mean to disappoint someone?
What comes up for you, Susan, when you think about that?
Um, well, I think, what I experience a lot with my clients and even with myself is that tension you feel of discomfort in someone else, sitting with them as they're experiencing uncomfortable emotions causes me to feel uncomfortable,
Mm,
right? So there's that tension that happens between people, and I know I could resolve that by changing my answer or changing who I am,
right.
to just allow it to be in the space, um, can be really challenging. And what are they thinking, right? What are they thinking about me?
So being able what I hear you saying, that one tool might be being able to just sit with the uncomfortableness, the quietness, um, the awkwardness of
Mhm,
being in a different place, maybe not in agreement with somebody, uh,
mhm.
might be a great way to grow your ability to keep your feet firmly rooted in your own authenticity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and allowing, basically giving permission for another person to feel.
So, that's really cool what you just said, because what I just heard is that to discover my voice, sometimes I can just be quiet and sit with the uncomfortableness, and that is still me using my voice.
Yes,
Wow.
that's
I like
true.
that. Yeah.
A
So,
silent voice, a chosen voice, right? Not in
yeah,
passivity, but, out of choice.
out of choice, like I'm still rooted in who I am. I'm not going to take this up, but I'm also not going to change who I am just because your opinion is different.
Mhm.
Mm. Um,
Yeah, and watching what happens in the relationship. So I see Sherry's commenting, uh, that she fears they won't love her if she disappoints them,
yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
So there's conditions in that relationship, right? And so that tension might be, wow, this relationship may crumble. If they need me to be a certain way for us to be in relationship, there's a risk there, isn't there? And feeling that tension can be intense.
I would say absolutely. And I feel that probably the strongest with my daughters, and it's not um, probably not for fear of them rejecting me, but it's an unhealthy kind of need for others to be okay, right?
Mm, the
But I
need
think,
for others to be okay.
yeah, the need for others to be okay, yeah, which is the same thing as saying I don't want to disappoint them. I don't want them to feel unloved, right? I don't want
Mhm.
them, yeah. And so, but go ahead.
No, I was just that really resonates with me as well. When you're okay, I feel okay, right?
Mm,
When you're settled, then I can be settled. There's
yeah.
something about that that rings true for me for sure.
So, yeah, I'm just looking at the chat here. Somebody's resonating with me not being a traditional housewife. Thank you, Rachel. It's something that I do. I don't particularly love it. Um, so yeah, when I look at the chat, Susan, I hear a lot of fear of rejection. And I
Mhm,
honestly, I think this is a good place for us to talk about what that might be like. Like what are your when you're in a situation and you're with a particular individual and they're not in agreement with who you are, or even worse, arguing against who you are, um, and you face the potential for rejection. What's that like?
mhm.
Sometimes it can be a good thing.
Yeah, in what way? How do you mean that? How could it be a good thing?
Well, I just had grown into this unique way of looking at it. Like if I can't use my voice in certain places, well, and we're going to talk about how to find your voice in just a minute. But if I can't use my voice, then I've just Leslie has just taught me to ask questions like, what does that say to me about this place that I'm at? So suppose you're in a difficult situation in your marriage and you go to your pastor, right? And you're wanting to get help from your
Mhm,
pastor and you're wanting understanding and you're basically expressing something that's happening to you that's really not okay and you're not being heard. And worse than that, your pastor or the layperson, whoever's working with you, is giving you information that is asking you to change who you are and what you believe about how a relationship should work. In other words, you should just be silent. You should just surrender. Some of those terms that we're so familiar with. Um, you know, in those situations, what happens to you in that moment? So for me, when I'm seeing something like that, that hasn't actually happened to me because I hadn't, in that situation. But for me, that's just information that you take from the relationship that I'm not going to be heard here. I'm not going to be celebrated. And
Mm.
this is why we're here today. We're talking about what it looks like to walk in core strength. So if you know who you clearly are, and this other person that you've considered maybe a wise other in your life is not giving you the information or the validation for who you know God has called you to be, stepping away is a gift because God is showing you that I can't be, well, in other words, he's saying you can't be you in this relationship. So we're for me, it's just a step toward reality and truth, in other
Mm.
words.
Yeah,
And
which is beautiful. It's our C step of core, right?
right, right.
Recognizing truth.
And
So important.
yeah, and so we talked about this earlier, and understanding that someone may not be in the same place that I am of understanding growth and maturity, and that could even be your pastor. Um,
Could be.
and that's okay. It might lead to rejection of your whole church community. But if you are strong enough in your core self and you know how to walk in that with grace, right? And dignity toward yourself and the other, um, you can step away. And sure, you feel the brunt of the broken relationship, but ultimately, we recognize that God is using this for our good, even though it doesn't feel like it. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't say it hasn't been painful. I had a particular situation where that happened to me with a friend, and we talked
Mhm.
about this earlier. Um, it hurt me for a while. I took it personally, but I recognized that I couldn't be me in that relationship and express who I am, and then so with truth and reality, I told myself it's a one-way relationship. When I choose to engage with that person, I'll be there for them, but there's no me available to be there because he doesn't like who I am in Christ. You
Mhm.
want me to say more about that at this point?
Well, I'm reading in the chat, yeah, Lacey's saying, "What do you do with that truth in a relationship?" So if somebody isn't okay with who you are, that's kind of what Diana's speaking about, is that you found some distance and you recognize that was a one-way relationship. So you remove that person from the inner circle of your world, right? Is that they took an
I
outer ring.
They
Mhm.
did. I created some distance and I no longer allowed myself to be open and vulnerable because it was very clear that I couldn't stand on my values and who I was. In that, if I were to stay in that relationship, I had to alter and pretend, and I wasn't going to do that.
Mhm.
Right?
Yes. And I love how you said you have a choice. You can alter and pretend, or you can be yourself. And sometimes it's one or the other, right? And so what
Yeah.
you decided is, I'm going to be who I am. And that means I've got to put this relationship in a different category than
Yeah.
it is and stop being so vulnerable. So I hope that helps you, Lacey, when you hear that. What do you do with the truth of this? Is that you've got to create some distance.
I still love this person. I still talk with them, but I know this person can't handle where I'm at spiritually and the differences. And so and we make our choices, right? And, we're going to be the most influenced by the 5 people that we allow into our inner core. And so we need to be very selective about that. And so I want to be in places where I can discover my voice. And, you know, yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I mean, I get
And
I get messages like this all the time. I was in the car with some family, and a family member had just died. We were driving down to an event, and, I'm reading this book my friend sent me. Her husband's a pastor, and I'm just, like, all excited about it, and I'm sharing with the people in the front seat, and they're laughing at me. And I'm like, listen to this," and they were laughing. I said, "Don't you guys read the Bible?" I can't read the Bible." And I was like, that was another opportunity for me to say, "This is not where my voice is heard. These are not the people that are going to influence me." I mean, I may try to influence them, but it was clear they weren't interested. And so I just took note of it. Like, okay, checkbox. Who are these people who want to really engage and talk about the word and join with me in the pursuit of that? Um, and so I think when you step into discovering your voice and you let go of the fear of disappointing other people, you stop taking things personally and you take it more
Mm.
as a message from God as He's just showing you where He wants you to walk, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's beautiful and, encouraging others, you do have that choice. This is not a have to, right? I have to be in relationship, therefore I have to
Yeah.
quiet my voice, as you get a choice. But I see in the chat, some questions about what if this is your husband? It's okay to walk away from friends, but marriage is different. You can't just leave. What are your thoughts about that?
Um, well, I'm not even talking about walking away from friends. I still see that friend. I still
Mhm.
call, we still get together, but I've learned that I can't go to deep places with him or to the other group. I learned that they're not going to go to where my heart is at, the things that I want to process and talk about. And so whether it's your spouse or a family member, you're not like leaving them, but you're recognizing that you don't let them into the inner depths of your heart because it's not going to be cherished or held well.
Yeah. Exactly. And when you're talking about a marriage, that is our expectation, right? And that is what God designed it to be. That deep knowing, that true intimacy of being able to share who you are and having that other person encourage that and help shape who God is calling you to be. But what happens if that's not the relationship you're in, right? Great disappointment. Uh,
Huge grief, huge grief.
Huge grief.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not how you intended it to be, it's not what you wanted, and yes, and I think sometimes it can be a real physical grief, like an aching in your gut or your heart that you're in a marriage with someone that you can't go to those deeper intimate levels for whatever reason. It might be values, it might be their capacity, it might be self-centeredness. Um, and, Susan, again, my favorite step of core is C, committed to telling myself the truth, right? Both inside and
Mhm.
out. And so when you recognize that, you tell yourself the truth and you deal with it. It doesn't mean it's not going to be hard and it doesn't mean it's not going to hurt. But a part of that truth, Susan, is, and I know you know this, but I think like a part of that is, that means I don't continue to break down a door that's bolted shut. And
Mm.
that's honoring of them and self-protective of me.
Yeah. Exactly. So I love that you're bringing in that core,
Mhm.
courageously committed to truth, no more pretending, right? And that's the part that we're really talking about is that choice. Are we going to pretend, right? Are you going to step into pretending to feign intimacy in a relationship, to appease the other person, to make it seem like it's intimate, even though you know you're being diminished or hurt or harmed, and sometimes physically feeling that grief of this is not what God wants for us, right? That can be really hard. If you're curious about what we're talking about, walking in core strength, I see Diana just put the ticker up there. We are offering a 3-month coaching group, Walking in Core Strength, where we really go through the letters of core, CORE, that acronym to help you build strength in who you are, having a strong voice, knowing who you are, being able to have boundaries and empathy, being responsible for yourself. So we have designed that, or Leslie Vernick has designed that course material, and we are offering that. So if you're curious and you have questions about that, go ahead and put those in the chat. We would love to answer those. But we're welcome you to click on that link, leslievernick.com/group coaching, if you're curious about that. Yeah, so thank you for bringing in that C.
Yeah, I think, yeah, practicing, where you can and can be authentic. You said something, I was trying to get back to it. You said, what was the word you used for, kind of pretending? What was the word you used? Did it begin with a F? Feigning.
Feigning, or like,
Yes.
okay,
So what came
feigning
up
intimacy.
Yeah, so what came up with me, when you said that is, yeah, and there are subtle ways that we do that in all of our relationships. You know what I mean? Like I'm aware of it. Well, I hope I'm becoming aware of it. But the other thing is, do you think feigning and fawning are similar?
Mm, yeah, I think they may be.
Yeah. And we do that because we're afraid of the outcome, which could be, rejection, disappointing someone else, or making them okay so we feel okay, right? So that's something I've been listening to lately is where am I, I think feigning, or fawning can be, maybe flattering someone as well, do you think?
Mm,
Yeah?
yes, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
That desire to make them feel okay about themselves.
Yeah. So I
Mhm,
yeah, those I think that's going to the deeper parts of how I avoid, the fears disappointing others and what that might lead to. What are some of those behaviors and things that I do just to quote feel safe or stable in the relationship? And
mhm.
and sometimes we do that, and it's okay, but when we do it and it takes away from our authenticity or we're stepping outside of what we really value and pretending to be someone other than we are, we're not walking in core.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's one of the costs of fear. So you're saying fear can cause you to choose one way over the other, and there's a cost to that, as you lose your core strength, and it
Yeah.
causes you to kind of feign or fawn, placate the other person. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what are the costs that you all are noticing? Go ahead and put that in the chat. What's the cost of allowing your fear to decide?
And while you're thinking about that, I just want to remind you that you can put a question in the question tracker. We would like to keep your questions related to the topic so that we can help you around that topic today.
Mhm. And I notice we do already have a lot of questions.
Yeah,
Would you like to jump into that?
we can.
Since we're here for 60 minutes today, and we are already more than halfway finished.
All right. Um, I'm looking. Let's see. Uh, okay, I'll start with this one, Susan. What do you do if this is becoming a problem in your marriage and you feel that your wants and dreams are being dismissed? When your spouse saying isn't enough enough, and I feel like he's limiting my potential.
Mm. Yeah, so I'm trying to find that one so I can
I
reread it.
started at the bottom.
You start at the bottom, okay.
I did.
Yeah. So what's coming up for you as you've read that?
Well, I'm not sure. If I were talking with this person, and I feel like we can. You can feel free to add to this if this is you. Um, but the first question I would ask is, what do you do if this? What do you mean if this? And I'm assuming that what this person is saying, if using your voice is a problem,
Mhm.
and that you feel like your wants and dreams are being dismissed, my encouragement is I'm a little bit more blunt than Leslie is. I'm just gonna put that out there.
That's okay.
Um,
Be Diana.
I'm blunt. He can say whatever he wants, and he can, enough is enough. He doesn't want to hear it. I would ask the question, in what ways are you allowing him with his perspective and his attitude to limit your potential? And are they real restrictions or things that you are allowing? Because sometimes they can impose real restrictions about limiting your potential with extreme measures of control and abuse. But I'm just wondering, like, in what ways do you think he's limiting your potential? And are there some ways that you could find some strength and move around that? Um, and step into some of your wants and dreams. I mean, yeah, you don't have to ask permission. You're an adult in this relationship,
Yeah.
and maybe he doesn't get a vote any longer if he's wanting to take you in a direction that's not yours. One of the things I love the most to hear about is, the aspect of the goal of a relationship is for someone to come alongside you and to see who you are and to celebrate that, and this partnership of a husband and a wife growing to help each other become who they're meant to be
Mhm.
individually, not just conforming as a couple, but individually. I think two different lives come alongside one another with different gifts and talents. And that's something I think that our audience does has maybe in general not really experienced, but that is the design I see.
Mm. Yeah. And I think if we add in the end of our topic, it says with grace, with grace. And I read that as the E step of our core. With empathy, you can recognize that he isn't where you are, that you're two separate people, and he may be completely satisfied where he's at in life and where you're at in life. He may be satisfied with that. That's why he's saying, isn't enough enough? Can't we just stay where we're at and call it good? And with grace and empathy, you can say, that may be good for you, but no, enough isn't enough for me. If I'm living at 20% of my potential, that's not enough for me. And I can recognize that may be enough for you. And so then we go to what Diana is saying is you get a choice. He may be dismissing you, but will you dismiss you?
And I'm seeing in the chat, I think that she added a little bit more, um, you know, that he used to put me down, and I believed that. And that is
Mhm.
one of the things that we do work on extensively, especially in our group coaching, is identifying those things that you believe that sound like your own voice that you don't even recognize anymore that hold you back. And that's a part of you identifying who you are in yourself and walking in that. So that is a part of your core work, is what are those voices? And I have them too. Things people have told me that, that I have to uproot and say, "Oh, that's a lie." I mean, but it's for me, I kind of enjoy doing self work, so it's fun work. But it can be really hard to identify all of those lies, don't you think? And that's why we need one another. And that's why I do
Mhm.
love the context of working with women in groups, because someone's lie might be your lie, but you haven't discovered it yet. You know,
Yeah.
so
I
yeah,
think that happens so often in my groups that when
yeah.
I'm witnessing that is when we get in discussions and there's vulnerable sharing.
Oh
You know
yeah.
that, Diana,
Mhm.
is that when people share, what's deeply going on with them, I see light bulbs going off. And there's so many women who say, that's it. That's exactly what I'm feeling. I just hadn't put words to it. And it's so powerful when we can share like that so deeply
Yeah,
and intimately that we discover things about ourselves and relationship by experiencing other people and being together.
I
It's
love that. I
powerful.
mean, that's how we grow, right? Iron sharpens
Mhm.
iron. We need
Mhm.
one another, especially one people who are on a similar journey. That's always fun. Do you want me to go to the next question?
Yeah. You
Okay,
sticking with the bottom?
I am. I know my voice was silenced a lot in my family growing up. I was supposed to be quiet, be what my parents expected, or just do what they wanted without thinking for myself. The whole kids are to be seen and not heard thing. Now I'm struggling to believe my voice matters, and that's okay to speak up because my family and husband do not like it. How do I push back against that and accept that I can have a voice? I'm not confident.
Mhm. Well, I think there's confidence in that, right? Um, just that desire to say, I can have a voice. How do I accept that I can have a voice is by repeating that to yourself. So there may be some beliefs in there, some underlying family rules that you began to believe that were limiting beliefs. Is I don't get to have a voice. I have to say and do what everyone wants me to say and do. But just your beginning to say, I can have a voice allows you to begin to accept the reality of that. Is replacing that old truth that you believe, that limiting belief, with your new truth that I can have a voice. And then walking into acceptance is allowing that to play out. What would it look like if I had a voice? How would I start to have a voice today, even in this moment? What does my voice sound like? What do I want to be saying? What do I want for myself? So that's just kind of moving you in that direction of um, taking that on as your new truth, right? What are your thoughts, Diana?
Well, your thoughts are sparking so many ideas for me. And I was thinking, God spoke the world into existence. So voice and words are a part of real it's powerful, and your voice is powerful. And I'm thinking that if you don't believe your voice matters, I think the first thing that we need to tell ourselves and to really find some evidence for in scriptures is that why would God want us to pray? I mean, and Jesus' example of how he was in constant communication with the Father and how important and significant that relationship was. So that's where I would start using my voice is crying out to God and letting him
Mhm.
know who you are because he's listening and he really and so just making that a matter of practice and discovering how deep that could be for you. And I don't think it happens all at once. You know what I mean? It's kind of something that we build. Um, but I would say that that is one of the lies that I would root out is that your voice doesn't matter. And I think, I've been in places where I've not been vocal about prayer and just thinking God reads my heart. But that's a lie, and I think the enemy silences us that way, because he knows that our words and our, reflections of our heart are so powerful, and you matter the most of anyone to God.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, there's value in our words, right? And
Yeah,
speaking our words, speaking up. There's power behind that. And that's, I think, how you build the confidence, not by staying silent, but practicing using your voice.
and I think as again, we keep referencing our groups because that they're coming up pretty quickly here,
Mhm.
but that's a
Next
part of
week,
what
we start. Next
that's
Monday, right?
a lot, isn't it? Yeah. So we practice that a bit. What does it sound like to use your voice and to use it being respectful to yourself, but having empathy with others? Because what typically happens, I don't know if this has happened to you, Susan, but when we try on a new behavior, we might go from being real meek to being really aggressive because
Mhm.
sometimes that energy kind of helps you get to where you want to go. But, we want to be mature in how we do that. And we want to have a balance between, speaking out for ourselves and yet letting someone else have their voice as well too.
Mhm. Yeah. But it does take practice. And so having
Yes.
grace with yourself as well, that it will take practice to find that balance of being assertive when you've been passive, not to go overboard to being aggressive, but finding that balance of having a voice where everybody matters, right? Your voice matters, and so does someone else's.
So sometimes, as you say that, sometimes it's not been wise or it will cause something I don't want to step into to use my voice with someone else. But I love saying it to myself out loud. If I know that it's, maybe not why, but it's because you need to hear your voice and you can validate yourself. Another way to
Mhm.
use your voice, which I understand now is, we're in the decade of neuroscience, so we understand the brain better. But I'm told you can look in the mirror and use your voice to yourself, and your brain does not know it's not you. It thinks you're
Mhm.
someone else. So you can use your voice to yourself in a mirror,
Yeah.
and it
So that
changes.
is actually one of our questions is, how do I use my voice? I need ideas. And so you're giving an idea right there of start speaking truth in the mirror to yourself. Look
Yeah,
yourself in the eye and tell yourself who you are, who God called you to be.
you know, and if I had to be honest with you, I mean, it's hard to take in the love of God, especially, I was raised in the Lutheran church, and I'm way more um I don't know, I'm way more conscious of my sin than I am of God's love. You know what I mean? That peace. And so just looking in the mirror and saying, "You are his beloved."
Mhm.
He chose you from before the foundations of the earth and you belong to him. I mean, if you looked, I mean, would you start feeling his love? I think
Mhm.
so. That's a challenge, you know?
Yeah, it is a challenge, and that's been made fun of. There's that old Al Franken skit, "I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me." I know you're probably familiar with that from Saturday Night Live. Our younger population probably doesn't know that, but it's been made fun of, but there is actually scientific value in looking yourself in the mirror and telling yourself truth, being kind to yourself, recognizing yourself as a human being, a person made in the image of God, right? So I would say start there. If you haven't been willing to speak your truth, speak to God and speak to yourself.
So we were at a wonderful experience that we had, and I one of the things that I loved, and maybe this is another opportunity for you to use your voice, but maybe I don't know if it's actually using your voice, but speaking over someone else's in the context of a group of maybe other women where you feel safe and loved and accepted, is inviting them to say to you, "Who do you say that I am?"
Mhm.
And hearing someone else's words of positive love, affirmation over you can be so healing and so confirming and validating as a way for you to step forward. I know when we did that, I came home and in my journal, I wrote down things that were spoken over me so that I could see and use that voice over myself.
Mhm. Yeah, that was a beautiful experience, wasn't it? I'm so
Yes.
glad we got to do that together, Diana, on a retreat that we were at.
Yeah. Well, let's see what time. Do you want another question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's one. Is it possible to have a healthy and safe relationship with someone who refuses to be responsible for their own emotions? My husband is emotionally dysregulated, has very little self awareness, and loses it verbally at the drop of a hat.
No. How so
Very
many.
simple answer. No.
No, it's not possible. You may have pockets of where you might feel safe to say certain things, but is that healthy or safe? I would say no. And if there's a constant pattern of that happening, and it's if it's a yeah, it's a relationship. The longer that goes on, the more that this isn't just a brain thing. This is a body thing. Your body resonates, and your body feels all of that. If he's Les Lutz, if he's hard on you verbally, and taking things out on you, your body's saying not safe, not safe. And so your brain is also resonant, but your body is not feeling that. And so you're in a defensive posture, potentially, you have all those stress hormones running through your body. And if that's a constant experience for you in a relationship over time, they don't even have to be doing anything in the moment for you to feel all that, but being in their presence can stimulate all that. And so, technically, no. So that's where we need to talk about how do we use our voice in a safe way, um, and or maybe not lose our voice, right, Susan? When we're in an environment at home
Mhm.
and you live with someone, we need others.
Yeah. Yeah, so the simple answer to healthy and safe relationship is no, but can you have a relationship? Yeah, you can formulate some sort of relationship, but that is going to require you making sure that you're safe and being healthy yourself. And so you may begin to verbally notice that he's getting dysregulated. So I don't know what words you would use exactly. So whatever words would resonate well in the relationship that he would understand. I can see that you're starting to yell. It looks like you're becoming angry at what I'm saying. So just reflecting that back in a calm manner and letting him know that doesn't work. I want to have this conversation with you. I want to be vulnerable with you, but if you're going to call me names or raise your voice, I'm not going to feel safe to stay in the room.
Well
So
said.
I'll leave that to you of what words you want to choose there, but it might sound something like that. To approach it with grace and to maintain a relationship where you're still kind and respectful, because that's part of what we are working on in core is really defining who you want to be. So he's dysregulated. He loses his cool at the drop of a hat, but who do you want to be in the relationship? So really focusing on how you want to show up and how will you keep yourself safe.
Yeah, and Leslie would say, if there's not safety and trust, there really is no relationship. So we just don't really call that a relationship. It might be an
Mm,
arrangement. It might
arrangement
be a
or
companionship.
roommateship.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
not really a relationship. And I love that, you know? Um, yeah.
Mhm.
So maybe
Yeah.
go ahead.
Redefining that. Yeah, what
Right.
do you wanna call that? And, like Diana had mentioned earlier, is sometimes our relationships are more ministries. We decide to stay in them for a reason, and that's with protection, that we understand how much we're willing to give in the relationship, and it may be one-sided.
Yeah, I remember that's an old book. Like, that book, you probably don't even but I think it was by Les Carter, One-Way Relationships. I think I still have it in my closet because I love it.
Uh-huh.
But the concept is I never thought about that, but, evaluate your relationships to see, is this a two-way relationship where I'm receiving and giving? And, or is it just one way? And yeah, like you said, well, ministry oriented. If it's a one-way relationship, we can give, but often we cannot receive.
Mhm. Yeah, and being committed to truth, that this is a one-sided relationship, right?
That's the hard thing because I think we habitually lie to ourselves. So that's why I think C is my most favorite step. I think we need to try them all on and practice them
Mhm.
moving forward. I
Yeah.
love the way, and maybe could I circle back to that just a little bit? But I
Sure.
loved how you talked about when we were going to come on online is what you said about empathy. Could you say a little bit more about that? You had said
Yeah, go ahead.
something to the extent of allowing people to feel what they want to feel, but the way you explained that was just, I thought, really wonderful.
Mm. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I think there is, something really important about that, giving them permission to have their own feelings, to be their own person. Um, they are also human beings, right, who are going to have feelings, and giving them permission to feel their feelings is really what empathy is all about, is just taking that moment to acknowledge and say, "I see you. I may not agree with you, but I see you, um, and I value you."
You know, the way you described that's very Christ-like. Like, uh, because you may be very much at odds with somebody, but the way you say that is just with grace, really.
Mm,
Um, "I see you." Um, that was very well said.
thank you.
Yeah.
And again, that doesn't come from the other person earning that, right? It comes from a place of, "This is who I am and I wanna be." Right? I think that's the example Christ gave us, is he was very firm in who he was and his identity, and so he could bring that with confidence. right? I see you and I value you,
But for
and
me,
it
the way
doesn't change who I am.
yeah, and the way you describe that, for me, takes the angst out of it. It's more
Mhm.
of just a peaceful approach to, "Oh, I see you," rather than, I don't know, this grit and anger of it just shifts the focus, like, I you can have your perspective, and you can be who you are, and I can be me, rather than fighting or warring against it or even holding for me, it feels like the grr when I'm thinking about, somebody who's maybe not demonstrating kindness or respect or using the voice. Yeah, love the way you described that.
Mhm.
I might replay this just to hear that again.
But I will say safety is key, right? So it's great to approach these things with empathy and grace while also making sure that you're safe in doing that.
Yeah. So I would just want to comment, Sherry, you're not wrong for wanting intimacy. We are designed for intimacy emotionally and otherwise. And I think we crave it. You know what I mean? But sometimes you don't get we don't have that opportunity in our closest relationships and so what we do with that is try to seek intimacy and outlets in ways that are safe and healthy for us. But yeah, that's a longing, and many women are in places of singlehood where they're not able to have the intimacy between a man and a woman. But I think ladies are really good at finding intimacy, don't you? I mean, we talk sometimes on those deeper levels. Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Mhm. And it's important to have that in your life. If you can't have it in your marriage, is making sure that you have a community where you do feel safe being yourself.
Yeah. Um, I was just gonna respond to Becky here. She's saying she wishes there was another way to take advantage of the support with the Conquer group without having to be on Facebook. And um, I think Facebook is a very small part of what we do. It is a huge community of women to interact with one another. But if you don't want to interact a ton on Facebook, on the Conquer page, you can at least find some ladies in your area or ladies that you can connect with off of Facebook. And then there's the Conquer calls. They're discreet and they're private and confidential. But Conquer is so much more than that. And really, the library and the resources are vast. So I just want to
Mhm.
encourage you that it really isn't defined by Facebook. That it's a lot
Yeah.
broader than that.
Yeah, and so if you're joining us and wondering what is Conquer, that is something that is not open currently, but will be open soon. So be watching. We'll be back doing some Facebook Lives, I think even later this month, right? As we begin to talk about Conquer. But Becky, another way for you to do that is walking in core strength. If you need a community, our groups are with 15 women, one coach. It's a very strong sense of community, and it's not on Facebook. We join via Zoom. You have your homework that you can work on independently to prepare, but we get together to have an experience. So it is very supportive, but it's also deep, deep sharing and encouraging. And it's an experience that we share together. So maybe that's more of what you're looking for.
Thank you, Susan. And I will say the Conquer Facebook group is private, and our administrative and tech support are adamant about validating everyone who has access to the site. So we have measures in place to try to keep you safe uh, with the really to the best of our ability. But we do want to invite you. I know we weren't able to get to all of your questions, and so we'll keep those on the question tracker. And we do want to invite you, and many of you, some of the questions that you're asking, we would love to help you build that foundation and work through some of the things that you're facing in the context of community in our group. So if you're inclined to wonder, please use the link and look at some more information in depth about what's involved. It's a 6-week commitment every other week to growth and definitely investment in yourself, and you'll get to work with any one of us, whoever you choose. We all have different days that we have groups. We'd love to invite you. Um, but it is an investment of time and resources. Yeah.
Yeah. Can we just take a moment of pause and cause you to reflect? Uh, what are you taking away from today? We've
Mm.
been together for about 60 minutes. What will you be taking away from our time as we've shared? Is there something God has impressed on you, something you've recognized maybe about yourself? Maybe there's a step that you notice you need to take to move beyond that place of fear and feeling stuck into having a voice and being more of who God created you to be. I would love to see those in the chat as we're kind of wrapping up our time together.
Good. What is your takeaway from today? What will you carry forward with you? It's so important for us to know what you're hearing that is impactful for you. It helps us to know that we're being effective and that our time spent with you has been valuable for you in terms of your life and what you'll walk out this week. And I have a question here. Is core strength group for a 32-year-old daughter who, yeah, absolutely. I would encourage this person who asked for their 32-year-old daughter is an introvert and has difficulty making women friends. Have her go to the Facebook page and just encourage her to try on her brave. We have many women who haven't done that in that context before who find how easy it is to step into that and challenge some of those thoughts that they may have about just being with a group of other women.
Yeah, I think it's a great place to practice giving yourself a voice, being who you are, being accepted. We do lay a foundation of safety. That's really high importance to us
Yeah,
in our group settings. And so having a place where you can come to for 90 minutes every other week to try that on, to stretch yourself in some way.
yeah.
I think it's really meaningful.
All right.
Thank you all for putting that in the chat. Yeah, when you're rooted in core, you walk in dignity and use your voice effectively. Love that. Thank you for typing in the chat. We're going to be live again tomorrow. Actually, Leanne will be live, not Diana and I, but the focus will be on how to redirect your focus to God's path. And that will be March 6th at noon. So if you found this meaningful or you resonate with that topic, please come back to this space and we would love to connect. Any last thoughts, Diana?
Well, I'm just really grateful to be able to work with you and to have this topic. I just want to encourage you all to spend some time in the mirror using your voice and practicing using that muscle and stepping into authenticity.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, April. I love you too. I love all of you for being here. We do want to support you in the ways that we can. So reach out if we can support you. If you want to be in one of our groups, go to leslievernick.com/group coaching to find out all the details and to see when the times and days are available. And we would love for you to take part in that. Thank you, Diana, for being here.
Absolutely.
All
My
right. Enjoy your day, ladies.
Bye bye for now.